Nobody has ever put ASD level 1 like this. You won't hear this anywhere or see it anywhere. But having done this for a number of years, and I know this is a gross oversimplification, but if anybody said, okay, Mark, what is your take on the number one problem with ASD level 1? Not that there's just one, but if there was one that could make the number one spot, it would be this. I view it as a condition where he, of course, it's not always he, but in this case, in this group, it's he, if he's been diagnosed. It's low frustration tolerance that results in emotional dysregulation. Low frustration tolerance that results in emotional dysregulation. In other words, social and emotional complexities that are frustrating, and he's not real great at dealing with his frustration, and so he will, as a defense mechanism, opt for some version of a meltdown or a shutdown or a false agreement. If you think about it, the problems that the NTs have had with him or the problem that he's had with others, not just you NTs, but other people in general, it always started with some version of low frustration tolerance. It would be interesting for you to think about it like that. And maybe would, in some cases, muster up a little compassion for that. I know that NTs, their favorite line is, I didn't sign up for this. Well, okay, you may not have signed up for it voluntarily, but you're in it. And so it doesn't matter whether you signed up for it or not. At this point, you're in it. You didn't cause the tornado that ripped your house apart last year, but you still have to deal with it. So when we're talking about autism spectrum disorder, as you know, it's on a spectrum. So level 3, which is the worst, and that was originally called autistic disorder. The title in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders says for level 3, requiring very substantial support. Requiring very substantial support. So this doesn't apply to your husband or boyfriend, as the case may be, but in level 3, they do have, it is the most severest form. They do have problems expressing themselves verbally and non-verbally. They have a hard time interacting socially. They have a hard time changing focus or changing location. They definitely engage in repetitive behaviors a lot. Sometimes there's gross and fine motor skills deficits, so they're a little awkward and clumsy and have an awkward gait. And they're not going to respond very directly to social approaches from other people. So that's level 3. So we're kind of working up the ladder now. Level 2, level 3 was requiring very substantial support. Level 2 is requiring substantial support. They just took very out of the line. Still requiring substantial support. So people at level 2, which is only one notch underneath your guy, they're going to have problems with verbal and social communication. They're going to find it very hard to change focus. You've experienced all of this. You may not have some examples you can pull off the top of your head at the moment, but they're going to have, at level 2, they're going to have a hard time moving from one activity to the next. They're going to have very narrow interests. They're going to tend to engage in repetitive behaviors, and they're going to struggle with nonverbal forms of communication. So now we're to level 1. Now this is you, what you're dealing with. Requiring support. So we went from requiring very substantial support to requiring substantial support to requiring support. So any way you slice it, they have to have support. And you've been doing it. You may not have necessarily framed it that way. You probably framed it, and I'm not faulting you if you did. In fact, somebody mentioned it last week. Seems like the NT wife does all the relationship work. 80%, I think, was the number. I disagree with that, but it's damn close, and it really wouldn't matter whether I disagree with it or not. It feels that way. So at level 1, they're going to have a hard time communicating appropriately with others when it comes to things that involve social and emotional intricacies. They're not very popular for saying the right thing at the right time. Terrible at reading social cues and body language. They have a difficulty engaging in back and forth conversation. They may function very well at work with coworkers, but on average, this may or may not be the case with your guy, but on average, they have great difficulty making and keeping close friends. So you could ask yourself, does my husband have several very close friends? On average, they don't, but that may not be the case with you. They're at level 1, they're going to be very inflexible at certain times. They're going to have trouble moving from one activity to another. They're going to have severe difficulty with organization and planning. And these deficits prevent most of them from living independently. In other words, he would be somewhat lost as a bachelor and relies on you. Probably never necessarily had the thought, gosh, I really need my wife to be my seeing eye dog. He may not have had that thought. But if he didn't, let me just ask you this, a rhetorical question. If he didn't have you, where would he be? What areas would he get a big fat F- on day-to-day functioning? Think about that. That's a rhetorical question. Even at level 1, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, requiring support. So that's what you're stuck with. You can continue to wish that he wasn't anywhere on that spectrum. You can continue to wish. You can continue to hope that someday he will snap out of it. That'll be your choice. And it's going to be a rough road to go down if that is your choice. But I'm not going to bullshit you. You have underestimated the severity of this thing. Period. Now that I've given you the bad news, the good news is social skills can be taught, but you're not going to be able to teach it to him. You try to teach him social skills and make his social skills worse. Social skills can be taught. The emotional literacy can be taught. You're not going to be the one to do it. He already doesn't trust you on so many levels. He already downloads your neutral message as criticism. So you don't stand a snowball's chance in hell of doing the work that needs to be done. And he's not going to be able to do self-help shit either. That's going to be another F-. But on the positive note, things can be done to help. He's never going to match you way up here. You're way up here with social and emotional intelligence, social and emotional skills, social and emotional needs. He's never coming up there. Forget about it. But he can bump up several notches, but he's going to have to seek some outside. It doesn't have to be me. This is not a commercial. But he's going to have to seek some outside assistance from somebody who has something to know something about autism spectrum disorder as it relates to intimate relationships. And until he hooks up with somebody like that, you can expect his level 1 needing support to just be operating at full volume. He's going to need support, more support than many of you are willing to give. I'm not charging you with being support. I'm not saying, okay, well, you guys you need to start being supportive. I think it's important for you to point out some blind spots to him when he totally misses stuff, and have some compassion for the fact that this thing is worse than And even though I just went through all this little sermon here, some of you in here are still thinking, well, I think he's catastrophizing a bit. I think he's painting it to be much worse than it actually should be. No. So the bottom line is he's going to have some support from somebody outside. And until then, I'll have to pray for you. Doesn't have to be me. There are other people out there that do what I do, although there's not very many of us. Preferably, he would be with a male that knows about the social and emotional difficulties with ASD level 1. So that's it. The summary is it's worse than you've been admitting, and he's going to have some support.